Hello everyone. Today we're going to be learning how to take off land in the T-38. You're going to be learning how to get it back on the ground, which is going to be important. But at first, a few concepts. So first, we have our little plane model. This is a P-51 Mustang that I made a couple of years ago. Uh, sorry, never got around to painting it, but it is going to illustrate some of our important concepts today. First of all, one, this is not a jet aircraft, but the concepts are mostly the same. Assume the runway is the bottom of the screen and that scale doesn't really matter. We're going to want to be landing on this runway, assuming I lowered the gear. So, first of all, you're, all right, this is becoming less and less of an accurate example, mainly because the P-51 has a tricycle, or no, sorry, it has a tail dragger configuration of the gear, which means there are going to be two gear here, and then a tail gear right here, and it'll drag the tail. Assume for this example that it has a tricycle configuration, which means there will be two gear back here and a gear in the nose. That's not realistic, but just go with it here. So, um, in the regular P-51, you're going to want to come down and then land like this. That way your main gear touches down first and your tail gear eventually hits the ground. But in a tricycle configuration, especially with a heavier aircraft like the T-38, you're going to want to come in and you're going to want to slightly pre-flare the aircraft. And this is for one of two reasons. One, it slows the aircraft down by creating drag. Two, um, it also takes advantage of the fact that you can now use your engines rather than your pitch to control your altitude. This is how you generally want to land the aircraft because if you think about it, you have a lot more range of motion or range of control with your throttle rather than your pitch because once you get to here, you're going to stall the aircraft. But if you have your throttle and you start rather low, you have until you could bring your throttle very high up to keep going. And at that point, if you have your throttle all the way up, it's safer and you can just get out of that situation if you need to. All right, so you pre-flare, you bring your uh, throttle up, and then from there, you can just use your throttle to control the aircraft's altitude while you use your pitch to control your speed by creating that drag. And the reason that your nose is able to come up but you're still able to go down is because of the way the four forces of flight act on your aircraft. So you have gravity pulling you down and you have drag slowing you down. You have your thrust trying to pull you forward and you have the lift from your wings trying to bring you up. Now, the lift from your wings is hopefully going to bring you up if you maintain a certain speed. You don't want to get below your stall speed because then you're going to hit the ground. Gravity is also trying to pull you down, and that's how this works. By increasing your throttle, you're using the force of your throttle to move your aircraft through the air to create more lift, which will keep your aircraft in the air. With more powerful jets, it kind of just keeps you up in the air without air needing to go past the wings at all sometimes. It depends on your aircraft. In the instance of this aircraft, you're going to want to keep that air moving over the wings. But that's how to illustrate this or to see this concept in the cockpit, we have something called angle of attack. Now, angle of attack is the difference between your path vector, which if we use this pencil, the path vector is the path the aircraft is going to want to follow, and then your pitch is the aircraft. Angle of attack is the difference between the path vector and the pitch. This would be your pitch. This would be the angle it's following. The angle between is your angle of attack. So if I'm flying in a straight line, but I'm pitched up, the angle between here and here is my angle of attack. If I'm going down and I'm pitched up, my angle of attack is that angle between that. And you can see how it's connected to pitch, but it's not pitch. So the thing is the T-38 has an angle of attack indicator and not a path vector indicator, and it's also really tiny and hard to read in this instance, so it's not super helpful, but it kind of gives you a frame of reference on how to work with it, and we'll get into that whenever we get into the cockpit. All right, the other thing is that you want full flaps on this aircraft whenever you're landing, and that is because those will also create lift and drag, slowing you down. And the reason you want to be slow is that you have a nice soft landing and then you're not coming into the runway at a million miles per hour and killing yourself because you can't actually stop in time. All right, the second thing, T-38 is Um, really good aircraft, but it can't be if it's too heavy to land, it won't land. And the thing is that it normally starts with way too much fuel inside to actually be able to turn around and make a successful landing without a fuel tank. So because in X-Plane, it doesn't know that you're trying to make a landing whenever you select landing because it's a program and it has a specific set of rules to follow, I'm going to show you how to reduce the amount of fuel in your aircraft so that it's lighter and you're able to land more easily because that way you don't need as much lift to overcome the amount of mass pulling you down or the increased amount of mass which makes it uh, harder for you to get into the air. So, or it requires more effort to get you into the air. All right, so here is X-Plane. Here's the T-38. This is just after the takeoff video. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to go into locations, select global airport. I like landing at runway 26 from a 3 nautical mile file, and from there we're going to pause it right there. All right, so you can see that X-Plane starts us off with flaps automatically. That's very nice, and you can program it to do that in PlaneMaker. So whoever made this aircraft took a lot of time and effort to make us have a better experience. The problem is that you can see that we start way too low. All right, and also because of the way the cockpit works, you just can't see the runway immediately. So the first thing we're going to want to do to make this possible is we're going to want to go into weight and balance and fuel, and we're going to want to lower the amount of fuel we have, probably somewhere to about 800, maybe 600 if you really want to make it easy. The thing is that we're not going to run out of fuel from here to there because it's only 3 nautical miles, and actually less now because I paused it shortly after we started. So from there, here's our AOA indicator. Here is our pitch, and you can also kind of get pitch from here, but it's not the best because it's not as clear. That rhymed unintentionally, I'm sorry. All right, so first thing we're going to want to do, unpause it, gain control of the aircraft, and I'm going to lower my gear, put my flaps at full, and then also, oh boy, I'm way too high. Okay, so important thing here. If you don't, sorry, if you don't already know, these lights down here tell you whether you're on glide slope or not. If they're all white, it means you're above glide slope. Here, I'm actually just going to go back to my visual aid here. Okay, so again, bottom of the screen is the runway, starting right about here. So you can see the ruler. This is the glide slope you want to follow so that you land on the runway in the right spot and you're not touching down too hard and you don't hit anything on the ground. If you're too low, you're likely going to miss the runway or hit the ground. Now your glide slope could either be moving like this or like this. If you're too low like this, you might still hit the runway, but you might hit something on the ground as well. If your glide slope is like this, you're going to be just fine. If you're way too high, you're going to hit the ground way too hard and damage your gear. The thing is that indicator is only so smart, and you have to be smarter than the indicator. Your glide slope could be the right glide slope, except for the fact that it's shifted back here, and you're going to hit the ground right in front of the runway. Now it will show you that you have the right glide slope pretty much until you get close to that runway and it realizes you're way too low compared to where you should be, which is right here. And if you follow that perfect glide slope in, it's going to notice you're off right about here. So you need to use references from around your aircraft inside the cockpit to figure out where you are. So, for instance, I'm actually going to just start flying this thing and talk to you guys about it when we're done. But you can use those lights from the beginning, but also you can use buildings around you. Now, this is only good for VFR flying. The problem with IFR flying is that you lose a lot of these reference points. Um, For the purposes of this project, you're going to want to use VFR flying and not turn up clouds or fog or anything like that. And that's just because it's going to make it way too difficult. It also might change the results of your test. And I don't want to have to teach you guys how to fly VFR, mainly because I just don't know very well myself. So it's important to know your aircraft. As you can see, we're way too low now. T-38 has a cockpit that's very high and very hard to see over. So, boy. And as you can see, I haven't flown in a while, and we're probably going to do this again. This is a great example of how all right, I'm aborting the landing. This is a great example of how you can come in on the right glide slope, but you're too far back and you won't realize it till it's too late. It's also a good example of why you probably shouldn't try to talk to people and teach them stuff while landing itself, unless you've been trained to do that, which I haven't. All right, so let's start this again. Down, flaps are full, and we're not going to want to use our speed brakes in this, just because if we use our speed brakes, we'll have too much drag and we won't have as much control over the situation. Okay. I think in a real T-38, my head would be above the cockpit a bit more, and that makes sense. All right, so I don't know how well I'm doing here. Um, in the T-38, you really have to practice with it and figure out the reference points landing at this airport. Um, that's in X-Plane specifically because in the real T-38, you're actually able to see the runway. Um, so it's been a while since I've flown the T-38, and I don't have a very good idea of where the references are. Speed brakes, watching my speed. And you'll notice I'm keeping the nose up, and that's to create drag with the whole body of my aircraft and slow it down. I'm just going to turn the brakes on now. And you can see I have a speed brake indicator down here. This isn't going to be a very good landing. I can probably tell you that from what I saw there. But with a lot of practice, you guys will be able to get it. All right, so we're going to go into a replay here. Go all the way, make that faster. All right, cool. And back here, and slow motion. Okay, so from here you can see I'm all set up. My flaps are at full, my gear is down, and wait, where am I at? I'm way too low. Okay, so this would be an example of whenever you come in on a glide slope where you'll hit the runway, but you might hit something on the ground. Luckily, I missed that building right there, but that's one of the main reasons why you want to make sure your glide slope is correct. And I'm mainly just flying off the reference points of how my runway looks compared to where I am. So from here, I noticed that I was a bit low, and I tried to get higher again. We're going to take this off of slow motion. And you can see that I'm flared a bit, probably not as much as I should be. And then as I come in, I actually increased throttle a bit because I noticed I was low. That's something you don't really want to do. If you're going to get on the runway, you're really just going to want to cut your throttle at that point and use your flare to make a nice, gentle landing. That was all right. Um, as far as touchdown softness goes. All right, and you can see here that I'm keeping my nose up. I'm using my whole aircraft to create drag, and that's because instead of the air coming over and flowing over the aircraft as it should, it's having to hit the fuselage of the aircraft and redirect, which will create drag. All right, and also I lowered my speed brakes, turned on my brakes, and we're going to come to a nice gentle stop here in a moment. And that's how you land the T-38. Hopefully, we've gone over some of the more important concepts for you to know while landing. I hope you guys understand how this works, but mainly, just as a recap, you're going to want to come in, full flaps, gear down, pre-flare, and then make a slightly increase your pitch at the end for a final flare. And that's how you do it. Other than that, have a good day. Stay safe out there, guys, and I'll see you next time. Next time we're flying the F-14, so hopefully you guys are excited about that.